So I made a lot of like missteps. I didn't know any better, and there wasn't really anybody to talk to about it. It was really, really rough. And I think the only reason that I'm still writing after like the shit show that it all was is just because like I was 6 when I started telling my mom I was gonna write books one day, and like I do words. That's my whole thing.
Hello, and welcome to Both Writers Are Fans, the podcast that explores the intersection between writing and fandom. My name is Terry Bartley, and I'm your host. So this episode where I'm interviewing Jen Karner. She's another one of the many authors I met at LavenderCon. So she's a queer author. She's also wonderfully nerdy, and it was a really fun interview because we had lots of nerdy references. It was just good stuff. So good times were had by all. So for the intro today, I want to talk a little bit about sort of like accountability, I think. For like your creative works, because I've been sort of like struggling a bit with getting my novel edited, because like I've said many times on this podcast for the past several weeks now, my novel is like edited, like it has notes from the editor. It just needs to be, I just need to do it. I need to do the thing. I need to like take the time to edit it and just sort of write, make the changes necessary for it to be good. I feel good about it. I'm excited about it. And, we just moved it back a year so that I could like get it good and perfect. But it is just something that's taking a lot of like time, and it's making me sort of like upset that I can't do it like every day. Like every day I'd like to go to do like a chapter. But the truth is like life is crazy, and it's hard to sort of like follow through sometimes. And it's hard to kind of like always do the things that you want to do. And sometimes life gets in the way. And I've gotten very good, like mental health wise, at like consoling myself, like sort of like accepting like it is okay. Like sometimes it happens. Sometimes it's just what happens. You don't have to feel bad about it. And sometimes I worry that me not feeling bad about it uh, goes too far. And then I start to like feel like I'm not doing enough. And I mean, like, truly, all of this is like the same mental health stuff, right? Like, I am doing enough. Like, obviously, if I couldn't write for some reason, there's something that got in the way. I want to do it. I am doing when I get the chance. I think that all those things are like true. So I've decided that sort of like the way that I'm going to do this, because I've set up calls with Dustin again. You guys heard my call with Dustin a few episodes ago. I've set up calls with him again. So we're going to be regularly checking in like once a month or so. But I also posted an image on Instagram that basically is like a countdown of the number of chapters I have left. So currently, I'm at 37 chapters left to edit to be done with the book. So I've got that up there, and every time I sort of like edit a chapter, I'm trying not to do it like every time I edit a chapter, but like every week or so, I'll post another picture to say like, "Hey, here I am. This is how far I've gotten so far this week." And I'm hoping that doing that, even if it's just like seeing likes and comments on the post, will help me feel better, and help motivate me to sort of like move on to the next step. Because sometimes like thinking that a public accountability, like that sort of like, hey, I'm doing a thing, people in my life, please hold me accountable and make sure that I do it. Like remind me that this is a thing that I care about, because it's easy to forget. And I feel like it's working a bit. I have been making a bit of an effort, and also just because we talk about a ton about like marketing and like what to post on social media if you're an indie creative. This is honestly a pretty solid tool for marketing, because it's not hard to post the same picture over and over again. And I get to give updates on my writing process. It also lets people know that I have a book in the works that I'm working on that they can get excited for. So, I think that this is sort of like a two birds, one stone situation where, like, on the one hand, I get to give myself some added accountability and ensure that people are sort of like making sure that I'm sticking with it. Then on the other hand, I have some level of promotion. Like it's allowing me to promote the things I'm doing next. So we'll see how it works. If you guys want to jump onto my Instagram is Terrlet, Terrlet, like Piglet, but Terry. And check out the posts that are just the numbers, and check it out. Maybe give me a bit of encouragement. I'd really appreciate it. All right, so stick around. Like I said, I have an interview with Jen Karner. We jump around a lot. It is very nice. We have a bit of I think both of us are a bit neurospicy, and it shows in this interview. But I think it's a good time. So stick around. I'll be right back with Jen Karner. I'm joined by Jen Karner. So how you been?
I'm doing pretty good. I finally started work on the second draft of Sins of Survival, which is the sequel to Cinders of Yesterday, and I'm like 11,000 words in.
Pretty
So,
good.
yeah, I'm pretty pleased because the first draft was only 80,000 words, which means 11,000 words is like 14% of that,
Yeah, yeah.
according to
That's a
Pacemaker.
solid start.
Yeah, it's a good start, and it was all in December, like, not even from, like, the beginning of December, it was only, like, maybe 2 weeks worth of actual writing days, so that's super solid. Once I get into the flow of things, I can usually average somewhere between, like, 1,500 and 3,000 words a day, because my day job is that I also write, which
Yeah.
makes it really easy to just, like, come to the keyboard and be like, "Okay, it's word time." Um I just my brain so I've done the write better faster class which does your Clifton strengths thing. It's like it's a personality test that gives you 34 strengths and depending on where you're at, it just kind of tells you how your brain works. And one of my big ones is activator. So essentially, my brain has to like gear itself up to be ready to go. And then, like, once we're good, we can just like run until we are out of like juice. But I can't go until my brain is ready to go,
Yeah.
which means I sometimes spend like months just like staring at an empty document, being like, come on, I would love for you to be filled with words right now. It'd be great if I could like make words happen. Because 2024 like was just a beast of a year that started for me on January 1st.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do not recommend. Like I was joking about the Instagram trend of like take a picture from like January and then a picture from December and see if they look like the same person. And I'm like, I can't do that because I literally woke up to chaos on January 1st. Like January 1st was when shit hit the fan. January 3rd was when I decided to, or I emailed my previous publisher to get my rights reverted. By January, I think 9th, I had republished as an independent author. So like we took out right off out the gate and there was no time at any point this year.
So if anything, the year ending on kind of a low note for everyone was like refreshing for you because you were on the same page as everyone else for the
Kind
first
of
time.
like I had like it's very weird because like it started off like the exact way you don't want your year to start off if you
Yeah.
have a publisher, which is waking up to realizing that your publisher is actively bad at their job and that your books aren't safe with them, right? I got lucky because I only had one book out with them and because they're really bad at marketing, it had only sold like 30 copies in all of 2023. um, for reference, in December so far, because we still have one more day after today left, I've sold 70 copies. So like
Yeah.
the there wasn't a lot of like thought process behind anything they were doing. And so I never wanted to be an independent author. That was not I didn't want to have to do it if I didn't have to do it. But I was far more concerned with getting my books back and being able or getting my book and my series back rather, and being able to, like, tell the stories that I wanted to tell
Yeah.
and to do it in a way that felt, like, much more like me versus the bullshit I had been dealing with that publisher since 2021. Now, the really funny part about this for me is that so my original deadline for book 2 was June 2022, I think. And I finished a draft, like skidded in with that first draft. But there's so much other stuff going on that my brain was like, no, we can't turn it in. And then my brain had picked up all of these red flags with this publisher to the point where it was just like, no, you can't let them have that. We're
Yeah.
not going to let you work on it until like they're not in charge anymore. And thankfully in October, a writing friend of mine, Lou Wilhelm, who I tabled with
Yeah.
at Lavender Con, we did a Barnes and Noble event in Virginia because the Barnes and Noble there is really cool with indie authors. And so, like, it was 5 or 6 of us went down there for a day to like hand sell books, and then they bought a couple. But I got to talking with Lou, and I was like, "Here, read this draft, and just like, I just need like another writer to tell me whether it's salvageable
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
not." And then she read it, and she was like, "Jen, it's just a first draft, homie." Like, and I started thinking about it, and suddenly my brain was like working on the book actively again for the first time in like 18 months, and I was like, "Oh, my brain just knew that we couldn't let this publisher have another
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
book." And that's
You had
what
this block that wouldn't
happened.
let you.
Yeah, when I got the notes back, it was me with that gif from Clue just yelling, or the gif from Mrs. Doubtfire just yelling the whole time for like 15 minutes.
I mean, honestly, what a good anecdote though for authors, because I think that so many authors are like, especially like aspiring authors, are like, I got to get a publisher. That's the only way forward. Like self-publishing isn't valid. All these things. Like I need validation from an external source, i.e. a publisher. And like maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not worth it. Not all the
Yeah,
time.
I definitely, so like when I sold Cinders of Yesterday, like I wasn't over the moon about the publisher, but they had like a decent number of other authors. I knew of at least one other urban fantasy author who was there who had like done well enough that they had out like 6+ books in their series. And so like I was like, you know what? I'm not going to like look down my nose at a smaller publisher, especially because like urban fantasy and paranormal fantasy is not like wildly popular right now.
Yeah.
It'll come back around. It always does. Everybody loves witches. Um, but
Honestly, it's on an witches are on an upswing right now. You're
right, they are
you're
right
you're on a
now. It's
wave.
great. Next year's gonna be great for me. I'm gonna have my gay witch hunter book is gonna be out with book two. It's gonna be delightful. Um, but so like even when I first signed with them, I was really hesitant about a lot of things I saw, like, almost immediately, but I didn't know any better yet, and it's not like I had anybody I could, like, talk to about it because I
Yeah.
didn't have any friends who were also authors who were also going through, like, a small publishing house, right? Um, but the final nail in the coffin was on the first of this year, or the first day of 2024, was when I found out that their lifetime marketing budget per book was $500.
I've for sure spent more than that on my self-published book.
I had spent more than that on marketing with a book that I was not getting paid well for
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it was through a publishing house. Like, so I found that out, and then essentially what happened was, okay, so the publisher, City Owl Books, because I've absolutely been on the record telling everybody about the shenanigans they pulled. Essentially, most of their messaging was through like a Facebook group. And on the first of the year, which was a Monday, according to my year at a glance calendar that I have up and above my monitors, they did like a Facebook live chat, right? Where they were like, we want to be really clear about everything and this, that, and the other. And in this chat, they tell us that the lifetime marketing budget is $500. And two things happened during this chat. One was that somebody had recently requested their paperwork because they just wanted to see like how the spend was broken out.
yeah,
It was all done in the first quarter that your book was out. So all of the marketing that this company was ever going to pay to market your book was done in like the 60 days after your book came out, which is already like horrendous.
insane.
Um, Especially because books have a long fucking or have a long tail, pardon me. Um, and so there was that. And then in the same chat, one of our other authors, Susan, who publishes as SC Grayson, she writes amazing, fantastic fantasy romance. I love it so much. She had asked just like a regular question. Just, I don't even remember what the question was anymore because I have since archived all of my screenshots to like get myself away from those like
Yeah.
bad vibes and constantly having brain weasels about it. But essentially, the CEO's response was to not answer her question, but to email her and ask her if she wanted her rights reverted. And that turned into like a bunch of us were in a group chat at the time, like talking amongst ourselves while we are in this live. And we were like, oh, she offered, like, do it now.
Yeah.
If you're gonna get out, like do it right now. And like I signed with them through an agent. So I had to first email my agent, previous agent, because we no longer work
Right.
together, and she's actually since retired from agenting entirely, but was like, hey, they're a bad home for my books, like I'll still pay your agent fee if you just let me have my rights back. And her response was basically like, yeah, absolutely, get your rights back, because like my second book wasn't out. It only sold 30 copies in 2023. Like there's no point in keeping me.
Yeah.
And then I turned around and in February I sold something like 166 copies. So it was very clear to me, like the second that I moved over to independent, that like it was a lot more work that I really didn't want on my plate, but it was still better than the
Right.
alternative.
Right.
Um, and it also meant I got to fix a bunch of things in the book that had been bothering me since 2021.
And
Um,
only 30 other people had read them. So
Right? Like, I've sold more copies this year since going independent than I've sold since debut year, and the only reason I didn't outsell debut year is because I worked my tail end off between March and June of 2021 to, like, get as many people as I possibly knew to pre-order this book. Um, but because of the way that the stuff was set up to that publishing house, like I wasn't doing conventions or conferences or panels or any of that. And like it's so easy to sell books in person. It's so easy. It's great. You have a captive audience. Um, so like I did one, two, 4 events this year. I did Lavender Con in June, Telltale Steampunk Con in April, Key City Steampunk Convention in August where I sold out, and then I went and sold books at Barnes and Noble in October. And it was just a completely different experience once I had moved over to indie from the experience that I had had from being at a not great small publisher that acts like it's self-publishing and thinks that
yeah.
authors should do the brunt of their marketing. Like I could talk about this for an hour easily. Like I there's a 7-minute TikTok about it. There's Instagram reels about it. There's blog posts. Like it was bad enough that Writer Beware picked it up. Um because there were a bunch of us at varying levels like in our career. Like I was definitely on the like newer side of the spectrum, mostly because I only have one book out. But you also had like Lisa Edmonds, who writes the Alice Worth urban fantasy series. She's got like 9 books out now, I think, and one of them released this year after she terminated whatever she could with City Owl Books. Another is Charissa Weeks, who writes the Witch Collector series, which is a super popular romantasy series right now. Um, and so we all got out to different degrees. A bunch of us managed to escape completely, and then a bunch of people like Charissa and like Lisa are trapped for the time being until their books age out. Unfortunately, because the company lost 10 plus authors in a week. We refer to it as Rush Week. We made t-shirts.
Well,
But yeah, so it's just been like a wild year.
it's been a year. It's been a year. I hate to say this, but it seems like sort of a
It's a blessing in disguise.
yeah, yeah. And it also kind of
Absolutely,
feels like
100%.
a I hate when I'm an author, so I should be good with words and I forget the like phrase I want to use. The
It's
thing where
cool.
you're
I
like a warning
once
for someone. What is that called? Where you're
an omen. Um,
I I love
just
that.
just a little foreshadowing,
Yeah.
about like what could go
Cautionary
wrong.
tale. That's the one. Cautionary
Yes.
tale.
I
Because
I
but
think it's especially poignant for like queer authors
yeah.
because queer books are already like not for nothing, but like so I am an older millennial. So I grew up during a time period where like you didn't see queer books at Barnes and Noble. They didn't exist. They just weren't there. To the point that like in like I don't know, like 2008, something like that. I straight up stopped reading fiction and I just read nothing but fanfic for like 12 years because it was the only place where I was getting the stories I wanted to read. And then thankfully I came back and there had been an explosion of like especially because I only read genre fiction. So I read fantasy, horror and sci-fi predominantly with like a dash of like thrillers and romance in there. Um but I don't read like women's fiction. If it's in the
Yeah.
real world and nothing weird and extra is going on, I'm just not interested most
Yeah.
of the time. And there had been an amazing explosion of queer and non-binary and people of color who were finally getting their books published. And so my bookshelves at this point are primarily queer writers. And it's almost all women or not cis men, I guess would be the easiest way to put it. I am not a big fan of reading books by white men because that's all I read for the first 20 years of my
Yeah.
life, with
Yeah.
the exception of like Tamara Pierce and Anne Bishop. But most of what I had access to because fantasy was primarily white men, so I just don't read as much from them anymore because I've got a great back catalog I can like fill my time with. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but
there's a reason why queer people became so good at like finding queer people in stories that had none. Because
yeah,
we sort of like
exactly.
had to like find the crumbs, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's basically how fanfic happened. Like the reason it took off the way it did, a lot of it really started in the zine subculture in the 70s with Star Trek. And it was Kirk and Spock, baby. And then like over time as we like moved online, we moved into like IRC chat boards and then there was like the GeoCities period of time where everybody had like their own archive. I ran multiple Buffy fanfic archives at that point in time, which was around like 2000 I don't know, like 2002 to 2005 probably. LiveJournal, and then after LiveJournal servers migrated to Russia, not long after that is when we got to AO3, which is when everything got so much better.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
what a lot of straight people don't realize is that like us identifying like Elsa from Frozen as a lesbian is like progress because we were like we didn't have to ship her with anyone. We were just like
we
there's
were
just
like,
enough
"No,
there.
she can
There's
just be by herself
yeah.
and a lesbian. It's
There's
cool."
enough
We
there
didn't
that
have
we can
to
see it. It's
we didn't make her an ice princess like side character that was totally an OC that
yeah.
was made of ice and that she found in the snow one day because 15 years ago we would have.
Right, right. Honestly, like it's a big step forward that we're able to like identify characters as queer without having to give them a love interest.
Yeah, it's we're moving forward as a community.
We did demand that they give her a girlfriend, which has not happened. But
We're working on it. It's Disney.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
small steps, small steps. I'll take the incrementalism because it means in like 15 years we're gonna have lesbians and like
And and there is
explicit
a Frozen 3
lesbians.
in the works, so so let's see what
Just
happens.
saying, Disney.
All right, Jen. So
Yeah.
this has been a lot of fun. Anything you'd like to throw out there? Because this was the like about you section, and I feel like we got a lot
Um,
of that. Anything else you'd love to throw in about
yeah.
like your journey?
S-
Anything?
So, I'm I've been writing for way too many years. I started writing my first novel in first grade, so I'm one of those people who like always knew they were going to be authors. I have green hair and I have for a decade. It's a mohawk. You just can't tell right now because it's super long and grown out. Um, I might be a crow cleverly cosplaying as an actual human. We'll never know. Um, yeah, and I like to refer to myself as a feral forest queer because it just you get the whole
Yeah,
vibe.
that's a good it's a good all encompassing. Love
I'm
it.
a spooky babe. I love bones. Like right there are my bobcat femurs. Um, so yeah, I'm just like a goth author. Just this is what goths look like 90% of the time. Just comfy with bats.
All right, so I'm gonna go take a quick break. I don't know if I'm gonna do. We were gonna do a topic. I don't know if I want to because I kind of feel like I just want to keep delving into the things we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll be right back. So welcome back to the Rise Your Fans. I'm joined once again with Jan Carter. We're just gonna sort of like I think we're just gonna chat because I think we're kind of in this zone where we have a lot of shared ideologies that we just need to kind
Yeah.
of dig into, and I'm kind
Yeah,
of
we're
here
just
for
gonna
that.
we're gonna vibe and see where it takes us.
So the thing that you said in the first bit that really stuck with me was you mentioned how when you first started, you didn't really have anyone to like ask for advice about these things, which I think
Yeah.
is so true in the community. Like, because I mean, I'm a self-published author, and I didn't really know other authors, like not really
Yeah.
know until I became an
s-
author, which is
Yeah,
like wild.
like the really weird part for me is that so I grew up like right where lower middle class and being poor are making out on the side of the
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
That's where I
I'm
grew up.
familiar.
And so like I have always been a big reader. I was one of those kids who I learned to read and then my parents just could not slow me down. I used to have them just drop me off at the library for like 8 hours uh when I was younger. And so because of that and because of like being crazy and not doing well in high school because I was autistic and ADHD and had no diagnoses or like support scaffolding, I didn't go to college, which meant that I am entirely self-taught as a writer. Like I started writing early and I read a lot and I wrote a lot and I journaled a lot. But it meant that once I got to a point where I was really trying to take my writing seriously, it became a lot harder because the only thing I really had access to were craft books. And craft books saved my bacon so many times. I love rereading Stephen King's On Writing and Chuck Wendig's Damn Fine Story. They are my two absolute favorite craft books. Um, but because of that, there was no point where I was doing like writers workshops or
Yeah.
like that I knew where to find other writers. I literally only started making writing friends in like 2018 and it's because my day job is I'm a technology journalist. So I had to use Twitter for work. And then as I started to use it, I was like, "Oh, this is where all the book nerds are hanging
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
I've been missing out for years." And so I got involved with like Pitch Wars, it never made it in, and like Revise, Resubmit, and like all of those sort of like late 2010s writing contests and pitch contests that were happening. And because of that, I finally had writing friends and author friends, and I got to meet so many delightful people. But without that, I would still be, like, in the mire, and it was still a really weird situation where, like, when I sold Cinders of Yesterday, none of my friends were published yet. And so, like, they didn't know what something should look like. I
Yeah.
didn't know what it should look like. And I was tempering my expectations of what I expected from my publisher because I knew that they were a small publishing house. I was cool with that. I was cool with the fact that they were primarily like a digital thing. I wound up literally from the offer at the publishing house is how I got my agent. And that's a story all on its own. Um, but so I made a lot of like missteps between like 2018 and 2020, which was when I sold Cinders of Yesterday, just because like I didn't know any better and there wasn't really anybody to talk to about it. Like once you've sold a book or sold some short stories and you can get in at like SFWA. You have access to tons of people who are willing to like tell you what works or what doesn't. I'm lucky enough to be in a couple of like great discords with people or Slack groups filled with other like authors and writers at varying levels now. But it was rough. It was really, really rough. And I think the only reason that I'm still writing after like the shit show that it all was is just because, like, I was 6 when I started telling my mom I was gonna
Yeah.
write books one day, and, like, I do words. That's my whole thing. I
Yeah, you'll be
really like
damned if
words.
if this
Like,
publisher stops you.
yeah, exactly. Like when I went independent in January. So the first week of January was just like I got bull rushed with everything. I had asked for my rights back. I paid for my cover art. I got it reformatted. I got my ISBNs. Like I got everything handled and republished it. And then I went to go talk to my partner about something. And I had myself a nice little cry on the floor in his office because, like, I had to grieve it. I had to grieve what I thought my career was going to look like, what I thought my writing journey was going to look like. And, like, the rug got pulled out from underneath me. And so I sat there and I cried for like 15 minutes and then I got mad because that's what I do. I'm a big fan of the shower epiphany, aka you're having a bad day, you get in the shower, you have a breakdown about it in the shower, you get out of the shower, you have an epiphany, you move on with your life. Um, I feel like for a lot of AFAB people, this is not a strange thing that happens at all. But my
Yeah.
partner had it happen for the first time in his life last year. And I had to look at him and be like, oh, this is new for you. I'm so sorry. I thought that's how we all processed shit. Um, but I sat down and I cried for like 15 minutes and then I like bucked back up. So I'm an extremely resilient person. I think it's just the background that I come from. I come from a lot of like blue collar family, and just like the thing I like to tell people all the time is that the world can sucker punch me as many times as it wants, but it's on me to decide whether I get back up from the ground or not. And no way in hell was I letting them get a KO.
Yeah.
Just
And and it's such a good point because like there are times in life when it's okay to not get back up, right?
yeah,
Like there's times when it's like this fight
absolutely.
is not worth fighting. Like I'm
Yeah,
done and it's okay. But you're
absolutely.
right. When it's your dream, when it's your lifelong dream, like you can't just
And
leave that.
it's also like you're the only one who gets to decide where you draw your line. Like I have lines in the sand that like we can call them boundaries. I like to call them lines in the sand because I point them out to people when they come into my life and I'm like, this is a red
Yeah.
line. If you cross the line, you will be removed from my life because I'm not I'm not going to the big one for me is that so I'm polyamorous. I have multiple partners. And every time a new partner comes into my life, I sit down and I have an extremely serious conversation with them where I'm like, I love you. You're an excellent addition to my life. I'm so happy you're here. I'm willing to rearrange things so you fit well. But if it ever comes down to me deciding between my writing or you, I will choose writing every time. So you have to be okay with that now, or you're
Yeah.
gonna hurt about it later. Um, I'm very candid about like what flies and what doesn't in my life because like part of it is the autism, absolutely. But it's also that I personally like to know like what are the edges of my sandbox. And so people who come into my life, I show them where the edges of their sandbox in my life exist. Because, I want to be an NYT selling best selling author one day. I want to, go on book tour for 2 months and I might be gone for 2 months. I need partners who understand that like if the door is closed and you hear me typing, don't
Yeah.
open the door. Don't come talk to me unless you are bringing me snacks because I'm gonna get mad at you about it. And that's just I'm very clear with the people in my life about it because my writing and my books are absolutely a priority for me. Like I was 6. I'm 37 now. So I've been writing for 31 years. Um
Well, and I think that it's something too that it's important to think about because whenever I think about like poly people and especially like the way that poly people sort of like have to organize their lives, that they're being healthy about it,
mhm.
is you define like what you want out of the relationship and what you're willing to not give up in the relationship, which I think is so important because I think that a lot of people in monogamous relationships don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
there's a lot of like uh, toxic like especially if you're poor when you end up with someone.
yeah,
A lot of times we end up living together because, like, you can't afford a house by yourself. You can't afford an apartment by yourself. You've been dating this guy for like 6 months. he can't afford an apartment by himself either. You guys can afford a nice apartment if like you get one together. Um and things like that. But so like clear boundaries were never drawn about like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. There's a lot of codependency
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
in monogamous relationships because you don't think about it. And we're like, society programs us to be like, your partner should be your everything. They should be your best friend and your lover and the person you talk to and the person you process
Yeah.
stuff. And you're going to share your finances and you're going to share a house and you're like all of these things where, like, so for instance, I am kind of an ambivert. I am mostly introverted, but like when I am ready to go out, I am a very loud, exuberant personality. But most of my time I spend in my office, which I like to refer to as my habitat or my writing cave, because it is perfect for me. It has all my books, it has a comfy chair, it's temperature controlled. I've got all my good art on the walls. Like, to get me out of the house, you've got to compete with like how comfortable I am at
Yeah.
home to make it worth it for me going out versus my partner, who I jokingly refer to as the most extroverted person on the planet. If he goes more than like 3 days without seeing or talking to friends, you can watch him deflate. And that's just not the way I deal with the world. So like if we were monogamous and I was supposed to be like his one and only like best pal, things would not be working out at this point
Yeah.
because I can only do that so much before I will hit a wall and then I'm a husk of a person that you prop up in a corner and you hope for the best.
Yeah.
Um and there's a lot of weird codependency that comes with that. Like, the thing about polyamory that I love is that it's really predicated on communicating with your partners and communicating constantly about everything
Yeah.
because a lot of things will come up. There's jealousy, there's time, like the amount of time you're spending with the people in your life. There's conversations about hierarchy or like what kind of polyamory are you practicing? Like one of your partners might be totally fine with just being like the person you see on occasional weekends, while another one might, like maybe you want the three of you in a house one day. Um, and so you have to kind of like find all of those wounds inside of you and just like dig them out so that they can heal properly. That I think just doesn't come up as much in monogamy just because it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Or it becomes something that like there's a reason divorce rates are what they are. And there's a reason, like, we just got through Christmas. There's a reason why so many women end up filing for divorce right after Christmas when it's like year 7 and their stocking had nothing in it.
Well, and there's a reason why like midlife crises are a thing,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like,
it's because people aren't following, like, they're doing what they were told to do and not what like drives them. Like the thing I tell all my friends, because most of my group of friends are not people who want to be public figures, right? Like most of my friends are LARPers or they do like club events in town or things like that, and I look at them and I'm like, it's not about like, I want a big life. I've always known I wanted a big life. I have structured my life in such a way that if and when that happens, I will be prepared to inhabit it. There's a reason I don't have kids. Um, and that's also because I make a great auntie, but, like, it helps.
yeah,
Um,
small
because
doses.
I never have to worry about, like, childcare. All I have to do is make sure I've got, like, somebody who can check on my dog if my partner and
Yeah.
I are both out of the house for several days, which is not something you can do if you've got another human that
You
you are
can't just leave a
responsible
baby at
for.
home and have someone check on it every few
Exactly.
days.
Like, props to the parents who are, like, NYT authors and they have children, like, props to them, couldn't be me. Weird auntie, weird auntie. Um, but the thing I tell everybody is it doesn't matter what you want, so long as you know what you want. Like, do you want to own a 3-bedroom house one day? Cool, that's your goal. You're going to build your life to get you to that point. You want a great job or you just have to figure out like what that thing is that you really really want and then you fucking sprint for it as fast as you can every day and it doesn't matter what that thing is, so long as you have something to like work towards. It's for me, a lot of it is also twisted up in a conversation about like stagnancy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of midlife crises happen because people stagnate and then something happens, whatever it is, whether it's like a birthday or you go to your 20-year high school graduation and you realize that like you're embarrassed to talk about what you do or any of these other
Or
things.
you have deja vu just doing fucking the same thing every day, you know?
Exactly, where you realize like, oh, this is not like I made a wrong turn somewhere. This is not where I wanted to be. And then it's really scary to try and figure out like, okay, well, like, how do I redirect my life to what I want?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things I've never been able to do. I've never traveled outside of the United States as an adult. I don't get to do a lot of vacations. I have spent a lot of years in an industry where I was making like barely $30,000. I don't make amazing money, but at the same time, like the career that pays my bills also puts me in a position because I work from home where I have a home office, which makes it easier to work on books, which
Yeah.
means like I know about all the greatest new tools for interconnected things like using the cloud and things like that. I've built my life around what I always knew I wanted to do. I'm just one of the lucky ones that figured it out really, really early.
Yeah. Yeah, and I talk about this a lot in the intros. It's never creeped into the interviews yet, so this is kind of exciting to see it creep into interviews with other authors. But I often have felt like that thing that queer people experience that are like, I don't fit in here. I'm not the same. I'm different. I've had that, but I've also had that with the idea of like wanting a sort of like public facing career and like wanting to be like people act like it's like selfish to want to be famous. You know what I
There's
mean?
nothing wrong with being selfish. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong
Yeah.
with being selfish. Selfish is not a dirty word. I will scream this until everyone believes me. Being selfish just means that you
You
put
want the things
yourself
you want.
first.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Abolish the idea. Like, are there ways to be selfish that are toxic? Yes, but that's just toxic behavior. Like, I think especially for a lot of women and AFAB people, it hits us harder in the face because little girls are socialized to be like, you always make yourself smaller, you always make it easier on the little boys. Like, there's a reason that women who, had parents and boys that are from the same family come out socialized entirely differently. And one of them can like balance a budget and clean their bathroom, and one doesn't know how to do laundry.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes down to like societal norms and the way that we socialize children and the way we behave. But I don't think that being selfish is inherently a bad thing. If anything, especially as we have started to have this conversation about like drawing boundaries and like what you will and won't accept in your life, being selfish is just about knowing what you want and knowing what you're willing to do to get there. Like, and if you're clear about that from the onset, then there's not this weird point where like your husband is yelling at you because you're not watching TV with the family, you're working on your book. Like, if
Yeah.
you were clear with him from day one of like, this is what's going to happen, then that just becomes part of your routine and nobody blinks at it.
Well, and the truth is, like, if having a creative career, basically almost any kind of creative career, by definition requires people to consume your work, right? Like that's part of it.
Yeah.
So like
It's why
if you
all of it's why we're all brands.
yeah,
Like, because it's a product. I joke with my friends all the time because so my Facebook is set up to be like a public profile, but most of my posts are still friends locked, which is where my true gremlin self escapes at all times. But then if you go and look at my Instagram, it's not the same person, because what you are getting from my Instagram are the parts of my personality that I have decided are acceptable for commodification.
yeah.
Like, these are the pieces of me that everybody gets, and these are the pieces of me that people who are in my life get, and they're not the same thing. Um, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this, obviously.
It is hard though, right? Because like I think that at a certain point, because the truth is, like, it's hard to post regularly, right? Like, it's hard to come up with content regularly. And what's hard then is to then draw lines and to be like, well, I could share this picture of my dog or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, this
Yeah,
part of my life that I
so
don't want to share. Well, I could share this now. Like, it could be a thing I
yeah,
could
so,
share
like,
because,
my dog and my cat are absolutely used for social media fodder. Um, but I very rarely on Instagram have photos with my friends who are not in a position where they wanna be public figures. Like, I
yeah,
have friends who don't care and or other authors, those absolutely post them, tag them. We're both gonna get a boost, it's gonna be great. But my, like, close friends, that's not for Instagram
yeah,
because I never I talk about it with my friends all the time, but my main social hobby is LARPing, which is live action role play. And I know that if I get to the point of success that I want, that there's going to come a day where I can't go LARP anymore because it won't be Jen,
it
the
won't be as fun
person
for you.
LARPing.
Yeah,
It'll be the author, and there will be people who try to show up to see the author. And that's an aspect of my personality. It's not my whole personality.
yeah,
Um, it's a very interesting conversation, and I mean, I do it for my day job too, so I was already kind of used to it by the time that I moved into, like, being a semi-public figure through authoring. I had already been a freelance technology journalist since 2015. So, like, I've done things like interviewing, movie stars sometimes or, like, riding roller coasters in VR or all kinds of just, like, weird, absurd things that were then getting posted online, but I don't post, like, what street I'm on or what the outside of my house looks like or where the doors are in my
yeah,
house. Um, but I do post, like, pictures of, like, my office or things like that. It's a very weird, like, dichotomy of trying to decide, like, which aspects of myself are open. Um, Thankfully, I'm just real weird and I read a lot of books, so I mostly talk about, like, bookish things. The only reason my Instagram has regular posts, though, is because I batch. If before I could
yeah. That makes
batch
sense too.
things to, like, Instagram, I would just disappear for 6 months. I did it this year. I disappeared from, like, May to September, um, because I have to batch. So the way I do it now is I batch 1 to 2 weeks at a time, and it's mostly, like, not actual photos, it's mostly, like, text posts or things that are, like, collaged or what have you through Canva, and then I'm good for like 2 weeks because I only post Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Uh, because I don't post on TikTok anymore. I don't do reels. I don't like I check in on Blue Sky and Threads, but I'm not super active there, and that's much more like stream of consciousness.
Yeah,
But like Instagram is what I would call the closest to like my author brand in
yeah.
terms of both content and appearance. And even then, I will literally, like, scroll through Instagram till I see what's trending this week, and sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, that's a good idea," and I'll make a text post, and then I'll just, like, reschedule a picture of my cat to go up a week later, because otherwise I won't think about it.
Well, and this goes back to like having friends that do what you do. I interviewed Lou like a week or two ago. And it was mind blowing when she talked about how she does her social media, where she was like, the majority of my posts aren't actually about me. The majority of them are about my writing. And I was like, that's
Mhm.
insane to me.
Yep.
That,
And I realized that this year that previously it had been a lot more about like me or like what am I doing? Like where am I on
yeah.
the next book as opposed to like the last month where I started actively batching things. It was more like okay, what are my resolutions for the new year? What are my like tropes for the book?
Yeah.
What's a good one-liner that's a great like promo for Cinders of Yesterday? And I've started kind of looking more at what successful Instagram authors are doing. And like the problem for me is always, especially as somebody who's autistic and ADHD and mentally ill, is that like Instagram is for curated people. And I am not a curated person. I'm a gremlin person. I'm a crow that they gave a human suit to. And I'm doing my best with it, but I'm still a crow in a human suit. Okay? The crow vibes on my bookshelves attest to that.
Well, and you're
Um
capable, but then you are capable of like taking the time to curate something for Instagram in batches. Like that makes a
Yeah,
lot of
to a
sense.
degree, because I'll just hyperfixate on it for like 3 hours one
Right.
day every 2 weeks. So essentially, like 2 days a month are my social days where I'll either have ideas or I'll have like posts I've saved by other authors. Like today's post is in and out for 2025. What are you keeping and what are you getting rid of for the new year? And so it was literally like 15 minutes to like tweak all of the settings, make it look good and find a font, and then it gets thrown up. But I also don't have a large social following. So it's that weird like I live in this very weird in between place because my first book came out in 2021. I haven't released anything else yet. So like most of the people who would be super excited about my book have heard about it or have read it.
Yeah.
But I don't have a new one that's ready yet. I don't have new art. I'm not like, and so there have been lots of times where it's just me being like, here's a picture of my dog. He's very cute. You like him.
Yeah.
Um, but I am trying as we move into 2025 to be better about it because I wasn't doing like the type of marketing I should have been doing in 2021 either because like
And you didn't
real
have the
talk, if
guidance
yeah, if you go
from your
through
publisher to
yeah, if you go through a traditional publisher or a big 5, like you have access to someone whose job is marketing. That's their whole job. Like, can I market? Yes. Is it the only thing I think of? No.
yeah. And it
Not at
shouldn't
all.
be.
Lou is another great example because if I remember correctly, she's got a degree in either
She
graphic
does.
design. Yeah, I think it's
Marketing,
graphic
yeah.
design and marketing. And so like your brain is wired to think the way that you need to think. Whereas I'm over in a corner like, I don't know, man. I really like these characters. Maybe you like them too.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's been kind of figuring out like what do I want to lean into, what do I not want to lean into, and so like there was a period, I think it was like 2022, where they were like reels. It's got to be reels all the time, and I was like, well, I'm effed because making one reel unless it's like super spur of the moment is like 2 hours.
Yeah.
I don't I don't have that type of brain capacity for it. In 2 hours, I can make up, a week's worth of content that I could schedule and tell Instagram when I want it to go up. And then I don't have to think about it again, which is how things happen. Like on Saturday, I was like, oh, this is a good post I should make. And I went and I opened my planner and it was like, you have no more content scheduled. And I was like, oh, looks like it's a content day. And real quick, like whipped up posts for this week so that I would have something going up because I'm starting to see like a slight uptick in the amount of people who are visiting my profile or the amount of like views that I have like just from doing these pre-batched things like 3 days a week in the last like I think it's only been December, but I'm up to like 3,000 monthly views where before it was like under 500. And it's the game of the more often your content pops up, the more often that eventually people will remember who you are.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when you have a green mohawk. It helps.
Well, this has been really great, Jen. I think that I could talk to you for another 4 hours because I think that we just kind of like get each other in a way that like is sort of rare,
Yeah,
which I
like we're on the
appreciate.
same wavelength. Like it's been delightful talking to you because like every time that one of us starts to pivot, we're like, "Oh, that's great. Let's go
Yeah,
that way."
yeah. So I need to have you on. I've been doing these shorter episodes, and I'll try to have you on for those because, like, I think that we just need to talk like 20 more
Yeah,
times this year.
absolutely. Especially because if all goes to plan, Sense of Survival, which is book 2, if it's after Cinders of Yesterday, is hopefully gonna if it's not out by August, I'll have a release date by August, is the fingers crossed hope. Which also means that I'm doing new covers because I want more cohesive covers for the
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
And I don't want to go through the same artists that my previous publisher used. So
Honestly, I'm excited that you're gonna get to go through this because working with the cover artist was one of my favorite things to do as an indie artist,
Yes,
as an
I
indie
I
author.
actually
So
know exactly who I want to do it because she's done 2 pieces of art for me in the past, and her rates are within my budget, and so I've got emails to send. Once I'm not sending them until after this draft is done, but it's a second draft, which means it's not gonna be as bad as the first one was, and so hopefully, at the latest by mid-March, I can send it off to my beta readers, which means if all goes to plan, it'll be in edits by May, and I'm really hoping that I can get it either published or pre-orderable by August because I'm going to be at Once Upon a Con at National Harbor in Maryland for a gigantic 4-day fantasy convention, and I would love to have both books ready for that.
yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if people want to find out more about you, Jen, where should they go to do it? What like where can they
Um,
find your Gremlin thoughts
I
or your curated
I am
brand?
available everywhere but Facebook as Articulate Dream. So that's Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky. I am mostly on Instagram and Blue Sky, but I pop into Threads occasionally. You should not expect to see me on TikTok since we don't know if we'll have access to it in 3 weeks. Um, and then on Facebook, you can find my author page as author Jen Karner, written just like my name. Or if you look up my name, Jen Karner, you can find my public profile where you can see slightly more gremlin activity.
Yeah, that's so great. Thanks so much for joining me. This has been incredible.
Thank you so much.
Most Writers Are Fans is a Starlight King production. Special thanks to our guest, Jen Karner. The audio and video for this episode of Most Writers Are Fans is edited by Bren Russell. You can find video episodes of Most Writers Are Fans on YouTube and Spotify. If you'd like to support the podcast, please rate and review it. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to send a message or record a voice message or leave a comment, please visit mostwritersaretfans.com. You can also email us at press@starlightkingpress.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid to tell your story.